witnesses and members, apologies for the delay in getting started here. We had a vote and we lost our committee room and had to allow 10 minutes to get over to where we are. So we're ready to get started. So with that, I call the meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 22 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Natural Resources. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082, the committee is continuing its study of creating a fair and equitable Canadian energy transformation. Today is our sixth meeting with witnesses on the study. Today's meeting is taking place in hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of November 25th, 2021. Members are attending in person in the room or remotely using the Zoom application. And we'd like to remind all participants that now that we've started, no taking pictures or screenshots is allowed, but we are being broadcast on the House of Commons website. As per the directive of the Board of Internal Economy, all those attending the meeting in person are asked to wear a mask, except for those at the table. If you want to take your mask off for speaking, you're welcome to do that. But if moving about the room, mask up. For the benefit of any new witnesses who may not have testified before a committee like this before, please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. For those participating by video conference, you need to click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and we ask you to go on mute when not speaking. There's interpretation available for those on Zoom. You can choose floor, English, or French. And for those in the room, there's the simultaneous interpretation that you're welcome to use. All comments should be addressed through the chair. And on interpretation, I would just like to encourage everyone to speak in a slow conversational pace so that our interpreters can keep up. It makes it, they're working very hard for the House these days, and it just makes their days a little bit more manageable. So we ask for that assistance. For those in the room, if you wish to speak, raise your hand. For those on Zoom, use the raise hand function. And when we get into the questions and answers, I very much let the members control the time where they're directing it. So if you raise your hand and aren't selected, it's up to the member. Sometimes they have a specific line of questioning. Don't be offended by it. We use a quick card system for timekeeping. Yellow card means there's 30 seconds left. Red means your time is up. Don't stop mid-sentence, but wind up your thought, and we'll move on to the next person. I would like to welcome Madame Posé to our committee as a guest today, and Mr. Morris, welcome to our committee. We have six witnesses.
Point of order?
Mr. Angus.
Well, yes, Mr. Chair, twice I have asked you to make sure that the Canadian Labour Congress attend, and you have done that, and so I want to put it on the record to thank you and to thank our excellent clerk for the work.
Thank you for noting that, and thank you to both Canadian Labour Congress as well as all witnesses for making yourselves available today. We have six witnesses, six organizations, and I'll introduce them as we go through this. Each will have 5 minutes to do your opening statement. Now, I understand the Colleges and Institutes Canada, Denise Amiot, President and CEO, needs to leave at 4:30, and so I would like to start with her so we can get her 5-minute testimony. And we will have Janet Morrison, also from Colleges and Institutes Canada, who I believe will be here for the duration of the questions and answers. And so, Ms. Amiot,
I'm okay now, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Well, you know what? I've already said you can start. So if you're comfortable going first, I will turn the floor over to you, and I'll give you 5 minutes on the clock, and then we'll move through the rest of the witnesses for their opening statements. So with that, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So good evening, members of the committee and fellow witnesses. So I want to acknowledge that I am speaking from Ottawa, located on the traditional and unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe Nation. Collèges et Instituts Canada est le plus grand réseau d'enseignement.
Colleges and Institutes Canada is the largest network of post-secondary institutions in Canada. With close to 700 campuses and access centers, we cooperate with governments, industries, and non-for-profits to train millions of learners. Our campuses are less than 50 kilometers from 95% of Canadians and 86% of Indigenous peoples. We offer practical, flexible learning practices to learners, whether they be in urban, rural, northern, or isolated communities, and we have over 10,000 programs.
Of the Canadian economy, the largest single group of Canadian workers, representing 34% of the workforce. Did you know that this means 6.5 million of Canadian workers or college graduates? As we make the move to a carbon neutral economy, it is a time of great uncertainty for many Canadians. And in addition to appearing before you today, Colleges and Institutes Canada has been engaging closely with the Government of Canada on a fair and equitable energy transformation through written submissions, participation in roundtable discussions, and delivering on green initiatives for many years. On pense qu'il y a des solutions.
We believe that there are win-win solutions that are not only possible but already exist. Solutions that can lead to commercialization and that present opportunities for exports for businesses, all the while creating reservoirs of talent and highly paid jobs in the green economy. Colleges are committed to being catalysts and leaders within their communities and want to be able to decarbonize their work tools. This is why Colleges and Institutes Canada is recommending to the federal government to help in supporting the strengths of the colleges to facilitate this shift by formulating 3 key recommendations. First of all, support the development of national training on green skills. 2, support short-term training options in colleges. And 3, provide extra funding to applied research in colleges. We can and we want to do more.
My colleague, Dr. Janet Morrison, to share how colleges and institutes are already preparing Canadians for this energy transformation and the net zero economy of our future. Merci. Thank you.
And I'll just say, Ms. Morrison, you have a minute and a half.
Okay. So thank you so much, Denise. It's my pleasure to be here both on behalf of Sheridan College as President and Vice Chancellor and as Chair of CICAN's President's Advisory Committee on Sustainability. This is a pan-Canadian group of 12 presidents and 142 members in our sector who are providing strategic advice and fostering collaboration to our entire membership on issues of social and environmental sustainability. I'm just very pleased to be here today to talk about how colleges are actively supporting all components of a fair and equitable energy transformation in Canada, and we'd be very excited to talk with members about what that looks like in practice. We are already and will continue to be at the forefront of this transformation. There's more we can and want to do to leverage the strengths of our sector and to provide Canadians with the skills and training they need to thrive in a net zero economy. So thank you very much for the opportunity to contribute to these discussions this evening, and we look forward to your questions.
Perfect. Thank you. Nice and tight on the opening statements. Appreciate it. Going to go next to the Canadian Colleges for a Resilient Recovery and Mr. Agnew. I understand during the sound check there were some challenges, so if we have any problems with the connection, I'll stop you. We want to make sure our interpreters are able to hear. So we'll give this a try and hope that it all works out. So, Mr. Agnew, over to you for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, and yes, please let me know if I'm not coming through clearly to everybody. And thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, my thanks to the committee for providing me with the opportunity to address you today. I'm president of Seneca College here in Toronto, York Region, and Peterborough. I have the honor to join you here today on behalf of the Canadian Colleges for a Resilient Recovery, or we call it C2R2. And I'm calling in from Toronto, of course, the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. So C2R2 is a coalition of 15 climate action leading colleges, polytechnics, institutes, and cégep from across Canada, from coast to coast to coast. And we have the scale and the geography to reach thousands upon thousands of Canadians and help them move to new careers, to enhance current skills, to support that transition to a carbon neutral or low carbon economy, as well as fostering equity, diversity, and inclusion through a focus on women, underrepresented populations, and Indigenous peoples. Now, my friends Denise and Janet are here as well from Colleges and Institutes Canada, along with Polytechnics Canada. C2R2 has formed a special affiliation with a shared commitment to environmental sustainability, and a resilient recovery for the economy. And together, we're promoting our academic institutions as a key players in a people-centered just transitions. But I do want to today share with you 3 recommendations from our coalition related to the discussion paper. And my first relates, and it picks up on a point Denise made, it relates to how funding opportunities are made available in our sector. You know, the NRCan discussion paper said, and I quote, "Climate change is the challenge of our generation. And the transition to a low carbon economy is also one of our greatest opportunities." Of course, I couldn't, and I'm sure all the witnesses couldn't agree more, but with respect, I also want to suggest that the implementation of programs focused on those energy transitions live up to the bold words in the paper and reflect the sense of urgency that I think most of us are feeling around the climate crisis. Our institutions have to wait for open calls for proposals perhaps once or twice a year, and then from a single department. And often they don't align with project opportunities. And that creates an unnecessary rush for partnerships and proposals. And I would suggest, again, with respect, that 6 to 8 months is a long time to wait for the review of a project submission. So we are encouraging a more kind of whole government approach to funding programs with cross-departmental collaboration on low carbon projects. And to help speed up, to expedite the implementation, we suggest programs have ongoing intakes, rolling application dates, and multiple opportunities to submit proposals. Now, my second recommendation relates to the understanding the needs of workers and their employers in the critical phases of transitions. You know, workers across industry, from manufacturing to information technology, are approaching us, all of us, for short-term upskilling and retraining to prepare them for those new careers and opportunities. But it's important to understand that in many cases, these are not new jobs, but in fact, they're existing jobs that are evolving over time. And a fair and equitable transition for our workforce requires supporting workers at all steps along the way, not only when the roles have in fact transformed into something brand new. And it's very important to provide workers with supports throughout all those phases of incremental changes. And that's part of how we'll strive to leave no one behind. So finally, Mr. Chair, as we said in our submission on the just transition legislation, the needs of the Canadian workforce are in fact nuanced. And it's important to recognize that there are distinct groups of workers and they have different characteristics. And 3 large clusters are, first, the upskilling workers, those already in the workforce who require short cycle training. The incoming or new workers, these could be high school students coming into post-secondary, they could be workers coming from entirely different careers, or those returning to the workforce from some time outside it. Their, of course, education journey will be much longer than those in that first group. And then internationally trained workers, workers who bring skills with them from other countries but need supports. Each of these groups has different needs. And through the pathways and proven support systems that our institutions have developed, C2R2 has the strength to support all learners, especially those who face added barriers through all stages of the transition into or within the workforce. I look forward to your questions and the discussion. And again, thank you for your time. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great, thank you. Right on time, and your audio was perfect, so it looks like we're good. We'll go now to the Canadian Labour Congress, and we have Mr. Rousseau who will provide the opening statement. So over to you for your 5-minute opening statement.
Merci et bonjour, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you and good day, Chair and honorable members. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. I'm Larry Rousseau. I'm Executive VP of the Canadian Labour Congress. The CLC is Canada's largest labour organization, speaking on national issues on behalf of over 3 million unionized workers, including workers in high-emitting sectors. Inaudible. I will speak in English, but you're invited to ask questions in the language of your choice.
An international advocate for just transition measures. Energy and resource sector workers already understand the grim reality of climate change because they are living it, and they get the need to transition to clean and renewable sources of energy, but they insist, and we insist, that the transition benefits workers instead of occurring at their expense. Workers must see their own future reflected in a vision of net zero Canada. Otherwise, uncertainty, resentment, and opposition will continue to frustrate the accelerated transition needed to meet our climate goals. There's broad interest in the concept of just transition, perhaps without it being well understood. Just transition can do a lot of things, but ultimately it is all about jobs. So affected workers need decent new jobs to go to a pension and security for decent old age. New jobs should be of equivalent quality to the ones that are disappearing or better. And people will understandably resist a transition that expects them to trade their family and community supporting wages, benefits, and pensions for precarious or low wage or unsafe work. So ultimately, workers and communities need a plan. Workers need to know where are the new jobs, what are the pathways for them to get from here to there, and will there be training supports to provide the skills they need for high-quality jobs that exist? What's the plan for those communities that rely on emissions-intensive industries? Workers and unions must play a role in the decisions made about their futures and the economic futures of their communities. This is at the heart of just transition, and it's well defined in the United Nations Just Transition Guidelines that have been negotiated at the International Labour Organization, the ILO. Canada's unions support the commitment to bring in just transition legislation, but legislation on its own will not be enough and may in fact exacerbate existing fears and skepticism about whether just transition can deliver on the promise of a low-carbon economy built on high-quality family and community supporting jobs. So we need a blueprint. We need a blueprint that includes the types and numbers of jobs that will be needed to meet the needs of a net zero economy. What are the investments needed to drive that job creation, and what are the levers to ensure those are high quality jobs? And training. Glad to see so many folks from the training sector here. Training is going to be a key component of just transition. We need to ensure that investments in training will deliver the skills that will be needed for a net zero future. Union training centers are well positioned, by the way, to ensure that workers themselves are receiving quality appropriate training that align with the job opportunities at the other end. And these training centers are not for profit, jointly trusteed with a record of ensuring that both unionized and non-unionized workers are trained to the highest industry standards. Their programs are accredited in every province with the exception of Quebec, and training is delivered by quality experienced instructors. We urge government, finally, to be wary of for-profit training operators who offer quick fix programs that are going to leave workers ill-equipped to succeed in the shifting economy. Monsieur le Président, je pense que mon temps...
Mr. Chair, I believe that my time is now up, so I'm going to stop there, and I eagerly await questions from yourself and the other members.
Comments, and I did want to also welcome Ms. Peel, political assistant to the president, as part of the panel today, also from the Canadian Labour Congress.
Thank you for doing that.
Okay. And we'll jump now to the Environmental Careers Organization of Canada with Mr. Nielsen as president and CEO. And with that, I'm reset at 5 minutes. The floor is yours.
All right. Well, thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to share my thoughts on a fair and equitable energy transition. My name is Kevin Nielsen. I'm the president and CEO of Eco Canada. Eco Canada is a national workforce development organization that's dedicated to support Canada's environmental sector from an HR perspective. We were established as a sector council in 1992, and we have since then produced labor market intelligence to guide programs and services to support the sector grow and reach its potential. We represent more than 3,000 certified environmental professionals with the EP designation, 35 academic programs that are accredited by us, and several thousand other stakeholders that work with us on training and employment programs. I think it's important to look at the energy transformation as an opportunity rather than a threat. Clean tech, as an example, is a $2.5 trillion industry globally, a tremendous opportunity for Canada to position itself to claim a decent slice of that pie. Transitioning economies is not really a new concept. The Industrial Revolution and more recent advancements in technologies and artificial intelligence has caused all sectors of our economy to frequently change and evolve. And at every step, there is a fear of job loss and interruptions, but with proper steps taken, this natural evolution should be embraced and not resisted. I believe that if we stick to the notion of a people-centered approach, we will be successful. Other than safety, I believe there are two fundamental areas people care about as it relates to their work. Number one is the ability to provide for themselves and their families and achieve or pursue prosperity. Two, the ability to utilize their skills and interest in building a meaningful career. If the transition to a low-carbon economy keeps these fundamental focus areas at the forefront, I think we can achieve the transformation while also seeing a strong buy-in among all affected people. The aim must be win-win. Another important point not to downplay is that we're not shutting down a sector. The energy transformation does not mean that we will overnight shut down one area and pivot entirely to another area. We will, as an example, depend on petroleum products for decades to come. If not for fuel, then certainly in various petrochemical products used in clothing, hospital equipment, to mention a couple. The transition we're talking about, at least how I see it, is that some workers will transition into new sectors, but others will transition their skill sets and remain in their current sector to help support with energy efficiency, with emissions reductions, and so forth. EcoCanada's focus is to ensure that there is an adequate supply of competent people to meet the current and future demand for environmental workers. The demand is high and it keeps growing. During the first year of the pandemic, as an example, when Canada as a whole lost 1 million jobs, green employment continued to grow and had a net growth of 5%. Our estimates suggest that the sector will continue to grow at a rate of 17% to 2025. This growth, coupled with an estimated 30% retirement to 2029, poses some significant challenges for the sector, and attracting people from transforming sectors will be essential. There are several great funding programs at the federal level to support this transition. Some of these include the Sectoral Workforce Solutions Program, the Youth Employment and Skills Strategy, Skills for Success, and the Future Skills Center. These and other programs that focus on employment support and skills enhancement efforts should continue to be prioritized to ensure that proper reskilling and upskilling is achieved as careers change and evolve. I also frequently speak with employers, and a consistent message that I receive from upstart companies is that there's no shortage of support for R&D initiatives and upstart support. The challenge is that support ends before these companies are profitable. If companies are supported a little bit longer, the investment will be returned to Canada in the form of income tax from successful businesses, and they will be capable of growing and competing globally. A scoping study that we did on the clean tech sector revealed that Canada was number 1 globally in R&D investments per capita in clean tech, but we only ranked number 16 on our ability to generate revenue from it. This is another core focus area as we need to ensure that our investments pay off for the benefits of all. My final thoughts are centered around being aware of unintended consequences of policy decisions. As we seek better and cleaner sources of energy, there are several unintended consequences that deserve more emphasis. With new technology, and especially battery technology, we will increasingly be dependent on other countries for rare earth metals, for parts, and for manufacturing. If manufacturing of parts, as an example, is done with the use of coal-powered energy abroad, this eliminates some of the emissions gain that we hope to achieve globally. So where possible, we need to support Canadian mining and manufacturing where we can more closely control the process while also ensuring that good jobs stay here. Thank you very much, and I'll look forward to your questions.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And now in person, we have from Future Skills Center, Noel Baldwin and Tricia Williams. And I don't know who's going to take the 5 minutes or if you want to share it, but I'll turn the clock over to you for your 5-minute opening statement. And
Thank you.
The floor is yours.
Thank you. We'll share. Merci, Monsieur le Président et les membres honorables du comité.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee, for having invited us to share our ideas on skills and labor in this transition and the impact on our sustainable economies.
Government and Public Affairs at the Future Skills Center. This is my colleague, Dr. Tricia Williams, who's FSC's Director of Research, Evaluation, and Knowledge Mobilization. Today, we want to tell you a bit about FSC and share some emerging insights from our work that could support governments and other actors in their thinking about the skills and labor challenges to meet climate targets and build sustainable communities and economies for the future. FSC is an independent arm's-length action research center hosted at Toronto Metropolitan University, formerly Ryerson University, and is a consortium formed in partnership with the Conference Board of Canada and Blueprint ADE. It's funded through the Government of Canada's Future Skills Initiative and opened its doors in February 2019. In 3 years, FSC has carved out an important role in Canada's skills development ecosystems through $176 million invested in innovation projects for skills development that are operating in every province and territory, more than 100 research publications on current and future skills issues, a network of more than 1,000 employers, industry leaders, labor organizations, and skills and training practitioners working on future-focused solutions across more than 20 economic sectors, including both industries experiencing disruption and high-growth sectors alike, supporting more than 10,000 Canadians to receive hands-on training, and delivering insights and impact that inform and support a skills development agenda that can help populations, regions, and sectors successfully transition to meet future labor demands. The need to get skills right is real. Our friends at Conference Board have estimated that unmet skills needs cost the Canadian economy $25 billion in 2020, or about 1.3% of GDP, and that this figure has risen by 60% since 2015. The challenges ahead present an even more urgent need to do better. I'll turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Williams, to tell you about some of the ways we're applying that framework to thinking about skills for sustainable futures for Canada's communities and economies.
Thank you, Noel, and thank you to the honourable committee members for the opportunity to speak with you today. So over the coming years, meeting net zero targets will not primarily be a technology problem, but a skills problem. This is a challenge that we will need to collectively solve together. I'd like to share 3 areas of insight and recommendations for the committee as we face this challenge. First, we've observed that regional, nuanced understanding will be crucial for Canada. Transitioning to a net zero economy may very well increase overall employment opportunities. However, we know that employment effects will vary by country and by region. Within Canada, we actually know very little thus far about how specific regions and sectors may be affected by energy transitions. In terms of labor and skills, that analysis simply hasn't been done yet. Second, we need to support workers and communities. We do have some evidence emerging about what's working for individual and community transitions. In Calgary, for example, we're working with the Calgary Economic Development to support workers in the oil and gas sector to retrain for in-demand roles in that city's burgeoning technology sector. The effort involves 5 local colleges and universities, dozens of employer partners, and most important of all, the project is having tremendous success for the workers themselves in finding new roles and occupations. Third, our research and innovation work is showing that there are some sure win areas for skilling investments. With the right support, Canadians are actually well positioned to make the necessary skill and sector pivots. For example, alongside OceanWise, we're supporting Indigenous communities in Nunavut to be recognized for their sustainable fishing practices. There's also a need for targeted upskilling, as we've heard other witnesses say. For example, as a carpenter or tradesperson learns about new technologies and new standards. And we're testing approaches and projects with both Skill Plan and the Canada Green Building Council. We know that there are several skill areas that are consistently reported by employers as difficult to find in the labour market, but will be critical to meeting sustainable transitions. Things like critical thinking, monitoring, coordination, judgment, decision-making, complex problem solving. These are the social and emotional skills that are sure bet investments now, that without a doubt will yield dividends in the coming years, regardless of the technological developments between now and then. So thank you for your time and attention. We'd be happy to take your questions.
Wonderful. Thank you for your opening comments. And last but not least, we have from the Conference Board of Canada, Mr. Michael Burt, Vice President. So if you're ready to go.
Thank you.
The floor is yours.
Thank you. We really appreciate the opportunity to present some of our findings with the committee. For those of you who aren't aware, the Conference Board is a nonprofit research institute. We're now virtual first with staff right across the country. We conduct research in 9 key areas, including economics, education and skills, and human resources. And of course, we are a proud partner with Future Skills Centre, with whom we've published nearly 100 different pieces of research content over the last few years and brought together thousands of people to talk about the future of work in Canada. I am a Vice President of Research at the Conference Board. I'm an economist by training, and I'm the executive lead for the work that we do with the Future Skills Centre. So, as all of the other witnesses have mentioned, this is going to be the green transition is going to be a big change for Canada with significant implications for our labour market. There's going to be increased job opportunities for some types of roles, reduced demand for others, and it will also change the skills required and tasks performed in many occupations. This last point is very important. We need to talk and think about jobs in the context of the tasks that people are required to perform and the skills they need to succeed. This is because relatively few jobs will be exclusively green. In fact, most jobs will have green tasks embedded within them. And as a result, we'd like to increasingly think about jobs being on a green continuum rather than being either green or not. And what's more, where jobs stand on that green continuum is likely to change over time. So that said, in our research, we did want to come up with a framework to talk about green jobs. And so to do that, we looked at the Canadian labour market in two key ways. Firstly, we look at the industries where people are working. And really what we find are three key areas where green jobs are present. Firstly, clean energy production, transmission and distribution. Secondly, businesses that are focused on energy efficiency improvements. So this would include primarily construction and manufacturing firms. And then finally, environmental management services. The second lens that we apply is looking at the occupations where people actually work. And we focus on three key criteria when trying to define green jobs. Firstly, is demand for the roles increasing as a result of the green transition? So an example would be power line installers. Demand is rising as we transition to non-GHG emitting forms of electricity in our energy mix. The second is where we're seeing required skills changing for existing roles due to the green transition. So an example would be engineering or architectural type roles where there's growing need to have knowledge about energy efficiency. And the final is entirely new or emerging roles, for example, wind turbine technicians. Using this definition, we found that there are currently about 900,000 jobs in Canada today that are green. That's about 5% of the workforce. What is more, in our work with Future Skills Centre, we're forecasting over the next 20 years what the Canadian labour market will look like, and we find that that share will steadily grow in the coming years. And of course, those are the jobs that we defined as green today. Keep in mind my initial comments that many jobs will move up the green continuum over that period of time, and so more and more jobs will have green tasks or skills embedded within them. So how do we help people prepare for this? We found that most people who are at the highest risk of disruption, so we're looking at people who are most likely to lose their jobs in the coming decades, they are able to actually transition to green-collar jobs with 1 year or less of retraining. However, there's a lot of caveats inside that. So, for example, there are many opportunities. The opportunities vary quite a bit depending on where you are in the country. So, for example, on a relative basis, Ontario and Alberta have much more opportunity, while Atlantic Canada has less. The cost of training is also quite different depending on what region you're in. In Alberta, it's very high. Quebec is the lowest in the country, and the gap is quite large. It's about a 30% difference between the two provinces. Now, the good news is we found that about 3/4 of people are willing to move into green-collar jobs. But in order to make this happen, there are a number of barriers that need to be overcome. The first one is fear. People need to know that new green-collar jobs provide job security and that they'll provide pay that at least is comparable to their current roles. They also need to know that they need to be convinced that they're able to acquire the skills they need to be able to succeed, because some people have fear that they're not able to learn these new skills. And the last thing is around helping people transition how they think about themselves. So many people strongly identify who they are with their current role, their current job title, and if that changes, there's fear associated with that change. Second big thing is around supports to cover the cost of retraining, including employer supports so that people can take time away from work. Most people cannot easily take extended time away from work once they enter the workforce. The third big thing is around equal access to training. In our research, we find that older workers, those without tertiary education, those with deficiencies in fundamental skills are less likely to be given training opportunities, but they're also the ones that are most likely to be in need of upskilling. So just to close, because I'm out of time, sorry. The transition in labour markets to our green-collar jobs will be a marathon, not a sprint. Hundreds of thousands of people will be entering and leaving the workforce every year. And this means that we need to tackle the challenges at different levels. It will mean different changes for people who are in school, people who are already working, and it'll mean that we need to think differently in our communities where the transitions will be different for each of our different communities. Thank you.
Great, thank you to everyone for your opening
just
comments.
point of clarification.
Yes, Mr. Angus.
I didn't hear the number you said for green-collar jobs. Did you say 900,000?
900,000.
900,000, okay, thank you.
Okay, so we had a slight delay in getting started today, and when I do the calculation, if everybody is tight with their questions and sticks to the time we have, we may be able to get through 3 full rounds of questions, and that would take us to about 5:40. If people go over their time, I may have to cut into the third round. So if we can try and stay with as close as we can, and if our witnesses are available to stay a few minutes beyond 5:30, which is what we had requested, that would be appreciated. But if you do need to drop off, just let us know. So the first round is one set of questions of 6 minutes each for each of the parties, and we're going to start with Mr. Bragdon. And Mr. Bragdon, it's over to you for your 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to each of the panelists and guests today. We appreciate hearing from you and the insights that you provide and the work that you do. Obviously, a very important subject that we're discussing today, and I know coming from the Atlantic region that you just referred to, Mr. Burt, and the challenges, but also opportunities that are there. I do want to just kind of preface the question with this observation that I'm making. Across the country, we're hearing great concerns coming from various sectors regarding future of employment, being able to provide for their families. We already are dealing with a huge rise in cost of living and inflationary pressures, and people are needing good-paying jobs. And we do know that the jobs that have been in the natural resource and energy sectors have provided good-paying, meaningful work for many Canadians. And many of us on the East Coast have had family members travel to the West Coast and to other places to work in the resource sector. And many are wondering, and I think this is a very legitimate question, because we even heard today, and we're understanding that many of the jobs that are being produced in the new green economy for things that they're transitioning to, the manufacturing sector of that is oftentimes in other countries. It's offshore. And there seems to be a transition from the production and use of resources that our own country is blessed with and has ample supply of, to where we're headed is largely based offshore. That could mean meaningful transition of jobs offshore as well. And I think that's the concern that we're hearing from many of our constituents. And I would be interested to hear from maybe you, Mr. Nilsson, and also then to Mr. Burt, as to what are we going to offer Canadians that are concerned about the fact that they see their jobs just being offshored, and not necessarily in a more responsible environmental fashion. We're just replacing our workers here with workers in other jurisdictions. And I think Canada has the best environmental regulations of many resource countries in the world. Maybe we should look at ways to continuing the jobs in this sector within our economy rather than offshoring it. Any comments? And I'll start with you, Mr. Nilsson, and maybe you, Mr. Burt.
Well, thank you very, very much for the question. And those are things that we grapple with all the time. To address a little bit of the pay concern first, I think that was a bigger challenge 5 years ago than it is today for 2 reasons. Salaries have increased significantly within the environmental sector. We do compensation studies every year. We're about to publish one in the next couple of months. So the salaries going up there, coupled with oil and gas salaries, went down significantly. It started to go down in 2014 after price of oil and gas started to decline a little bit. So we're seeing that salaries aren't as high as they were. Now, with the new uptick we have right now, we'll have to monitor to see how that's going. But salaries are increasing, and you are very capable of having a meaningful career to provide for your family working within the environmental sector. Manufacturing locally is a big focus. It should be a big focus, both from an environmental point of view, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, where if we allow others to manufacture our parts and use coal-powered energy in the process, we're not seeing any gain. Also, Canada has strict social guidelines and environmental targets. Other countries where we're manufacturing these parts may not have that. One example I'll use is that we frequently talk about the need to stop traveling and do meetings over Zoom. That would be a great contribution to reducing emissions. But the world...
Thank you, Mr. Nilsson. Sorry, my time is short, and I do want to get a few questions in, but you've covered a lot there, and I appreciate that. And I think the big thing is you hit it. We have some of the best environmental regulations. We have the capacity to even increase our production of more of those resources here in Canada and needed resources here in Canada. while offshoring, we're not even sure what the regulatory requirements are or what kind of coal footprint or other energy footprint they may have. And I think Canadians, especially since COVID, I'm seeing a huge increase in demand to make sure more things are made, manufactured, and produced in our own country. And we have some of the best regulation in the world. So that transition should consider more Canadian work for Canadian workers, including in the resource and energy sector. And Mr. Burt, maybe you have a comment along those lines as well. I'd be interested to hear what you got to say.
I think first of all, I totally agree with you that for a transition to be desirable, you can't have like a big drop in pay or something like that, or it needs to be something in your community. You don't necessarily want to force people to move halfway across the country, right? So those are both conditions, I think, of desirable employment. That said, in our work, we have found that there will be job creation in a variety of different green industries going forward. The opportunities will vary depending on where you are in the country, including in manufacturing. To your point, we do need to make sure that we're not essentially exporting emissions, that we set policies in place to ensure that we're competing on a level playing field, essentially, with foreign competitors. But we do think there's plenty of room for growth and opportunities within Canada as well within the manufacturing sector.
Well, thank you, Mr. Burton. I'm thinking in regards to this that you've got an opportunity here where Canadians can continue to work in these sectors as we improve our technology, we improve our resource development practices, and perhaps the emphasis being on more of it being closer to home, it's going to save a lot of the carbon footprint as we go forward. So I think, I've reached my time, but thank you both for your input on that. Hopefully we can employ more Canadians.
And there may be a chance to pick up that train of questioning, but for now we're going to take it and move it over to Ms. DeBrusen, who will have 6 minutes.
Thank you. I was really interested by, I think it was Mr. Nielsen, who had said that there was tremendous opportunity in new jobs, and then gave us some numbers of, I think it was a green employment increased by 5% during the pandemic, and then there was a second number, I think it was 17% by 2025, if I'm correct. I was wondering if you had a bit of a breakdown for that as to what would that employment be? Like, when you're looking at green employment, 5% increasing the pandemic, what was that employment?
Yeah, I probably need a full hour to give you the full picture of that, but the quick story will be it's in energy efficiency, it's in clean technology, some of the new emerging areas, the blue economy, but it's also in the traditional areas of environmental work, such as land reclamation. Canada has a lot of mines and old oil fields that need reclamation, and a lot of efforts are needed to clean up those projects. A couple of big ones in the north with the Faro mine and the Giant mine will provide jobs for the next 100 years in monitoring and reclamation.
Do you have any analysis of what the pay scale is for those jobs that you saw on the increase?
So it's always difficult to give you specific numbers when we're talking about a sector that employs people from grade 8 level education up to a PhD working for not-for-profit to for-profit. The median salary within environmental work, if you count everything, would be $60,000 a year. But that spans very much up and very much down. So we have a detailed report, as I mentioned, that comes out in a couple of months. We have the detailed report from last year that I'd be happy to share. That would allow you to kind of see the nuances by certain factors.
I would love both reports, please. If you could provide the one you already have and then send the new one when you have it, that would be great. With that increase, just my last question, sorry, Mr. Nielsen, I'm still picking on you for some questions, but the increase that you see leading up to 2025, are those in the same areas that you saw increases over the pandemic, or are there other sectors and other types of jobs that we should be thinking about?
The sectors that we saw growing would be work that considers environmental protection, which would be air, land, water. It would be within management and natural resources, as well as sustainability. One big shift we're seeing is you need more people with less technical skills than in the past. So that's one big transition. You need more people with commercialization skills, with business acumen, with marketing skills that can take the equipment and the innovations we have and make them profitable. That last little bit is where we're not as strong as some other competing countries.
If I could go to Mr. Agnew, because you presented that there were 3 forms of training. There was upskilling, I believe there was incoming and new, or returning to the workforce, and international were the 3 sectors. I'm just wondering, because it was mentioned that there are time challenges potentially for any of them, for people, what they have to set aside, and a bit of a crunch on the jobs that are needed or skills needed right now. So is there an average timeline that you have for, say, an incoming new entry to the workforce person to be trained for these new jobs? What's the time we're looking at?
I'm going to pull a Mr. Nielsen here and say it depends, because there's such a big range. But I mean, let's just look at the range of credentials that we offer. For instance, at Seneca, it goes from micro credentials, short term, literally a matter of weeks, to 4-year degrees. It goes from 1-2-year diplomas, 2-3-year diplomas to a year-long or a 2-year-long graduate certificate. So it really does depend. But why I was trying to set out those 3 is just to say that you really have to be nuanced in what you're offering to each of those groups. A student coming out of high school doesn't traditionally need a micro credential. They need a longer set of studies to get to acquire a career path or a skill, versus somebody, and we've talked a lot about upskilling, somebody who's working now who needs a bridge to a new set of skills that they need to continue in their work, because their work is evolving. It's not changing overnight.
Do we have enough people who are registering for those programs right now? In your estimation, for the new skills, do we have enough people who are registering?
Yeah, I mean, it's very much, I mean, the short answer is probably no, but this is very much industry driven. And what we need is a tighter connection, which of course colleges are very proud to have with employers. And so this isn't a theoretical exercise. We need to be right on point with what are the skills, particularly in micro credentials and in short-term courses. What exactly are the skills that you need to take your current workforce to a new place?
I only have a very short bit of time from conference board. I'm sorry, it's a very short bit of time, but I think you said that it cost more for retraining and upskilling in Alberta than it did in, say, Quebec. Why is that?
It's tied to 2 things. Firstly, the actual cost of tuition in a college program or whatever is higher or lower in different provinces. And then the second factor is the opportunity cost. So in Alberta, average salaries tend to be higher. And so if people have to take a year off work to retrain, the cost of them in terms of lost earning potential is higher in Alberta than it is in some other provinces.
Thank you.
OK. Et maintenant, Madame Posé, vous avez 6 minutes.
Mrs. Posé, 6 minutes. Thank you. And thank you to all the witnesses. Thank you for being with us this evening. I'm going to begin by asking a question to Mr. Rousseau from the Canadian Labour Congress. It seems that almost all witnesses agree to say that the Canadian government didn't have a plan to end the exploitation of or the use of fossil fuels. And the Environment Commissioner had a section and said that in 1992, 1993, the federal government had to act to help fishers and their communities that would be impacted in the sector of the cod, and then the cod stocks collapsed. The federal government did nothing, and we saw what happened in Newfoundland. We can give as an example also asbestos as a sector. So here's my question. Since there is no plan for this transition, should we not be concerned for communities who are living because of the fossil fuel sector? How are we going to have this plan in order to have an ecological shift within these communities? Thank you, Mrs. Posé. And so you've really, inaudible. You've really asked the correct question. It's nice to talk about training. It's fine to talk about what we need in terms of equipping workers so that they're able to face the future in the renewable sector. But if there's no money, Well, I'm going to backtrack a little bit. If there's not any plan, of course, how can we say that we're going to depend on one sector, whether it be the public sector or the private sector? And when I talk about the private sector, I'm talking about employers. Are employers going to invest in order to make sure that people will be well equipped, that they will be trained in order to face the future? So you've really put your finger on the correct question. And this is why at the CLC, we try to make sure that we have a plan, a strategic plan. I'm going to interrupt you. So we do agree on this. Now, someone from the FTQ came and was talking about what the Scottish government had implemented. There was a commission for a transition that should provide advice for a transition plan, appropriate approaches, and even there was an accountability process before the Parliament. What do you think about this approach? Do you think it can be a good approach? Answer, yes. Yes, of course. And we deal with national issues, but in each province, this would be the case. It's very important nationally. We need for the federal government to take the bull by the horns and clearly indicate what the strategy will be so that we can get there. Thank you for your answers. I would like to ask a question to Mr. Agnew. From Canadian colleges, he was saying that he needed federal funding, and also Canadian colleges again, where you were talking about appropriate training, about public funding to have a true economic recovery. Oil Change International came here before the committee and also the Environment Committee and was saying that the federal government was investing 4.5 times more money in oil than in renewable energy. So do you need funding? I'd like to hear you speak to that.
Well, I mean, I don't have the context of the comment, but in general, there's a lot of money out there, at least on paper, in terms of meeting the needs of workers for retraining and upskilling and so on. But I guess part of what I was trying to say is that from our perspective, there could be better ways of getting it out, working in the communities across the country. I mean, obviously, the federal government has an extraordinarily important role to play in terms of the funding, but the provinces have a very large role to play in, for instance, the control of the post-secondary system and working very closely with the federal government on skills development. But of course, as we all know, many of these important decisions and needs are best met through local conversations, not ones that are held at a national or even at a provincial level. They need to be local, and that's where I think, as Denise had talked about the reach.
Alors, je vous arrête.
I'm going to interrupt you because time is flying by. In Quebec, we do have an agreement since 1997 on labor training. My question for Mr. Bird. You said in your opening statements that people are afraid and that there might be an obstacle, that this might be a barrier to the transition. I understand that there are some prejudices with regards to the green economy. And sometimes I want to say there might be some prejudices that are put forth by some sectors, but what are the facts on the future of our jobs?
So I think the question is where we'll have job creation going forward, or
La vérité, je veux la vérité.
I want the truth, just the truth.
Very, very quickly, I'll give you 10 seconds or so, but we're out of time on this one. So
fair enough. So I'd say broadly, yes, there will be job creation. We will see it in every region of the country. We'll see it in a variety of different sectors. But it's really driven by the investments that the businesses are undertaking to create those jobs. Sorry, it's a really broad question.
Thank you.
So, yeah.
Sorry, Mr. Burt, you seem to be getting the tail end of the question period. So we're going to go now to Mr. Angus. And Mr. Angus, you got your 6 minutes.
Thank you. Thanks to all our witnesses. Mr. Rousseau, I want to just start with you. Gil McGowan from the Alberta Federation of Labor came here, and he said that the transition is underway and that workers are already living the transition. Is that the experience and the research that you're getting from the Canadian Labour Congress?
Absolutely. I mean, we're in it now. I mean, so we've got some catching up to do, and unfortunately, too many workers right now are kind of losing heart that they're getting left behind, and that nobody's going to be there for them. So this is of critical importance right now.
Well, I think this is really, really important because, we've had Clean Energy Canada talking about new jobs in Canada up 50%, up to 639,200 jobs. We've got research in clean energy jobs. We've got research from Calgary Economic Development, Global Edmonton about the huge opportunities, but they have a big but. They say there has to be investments. Like, we can't just have an accidental new economy. It has to be a created new economy. And what you've heard from witnesses today is that the government hasn't even done the research as to where these new jobs are going to be. What does that say to workers who are in the energy sector who are saying, where are we going with this transition?
Yes, whoops. Can you hear me? Yeah, so that's a very good point. I'm going to just ask Tara to come in, my colleague Tara Peel, because she has perhaps something that I think we should share. Okay.
Yeah, I think that is a good point. That there is, we're currently dealing with a significant trust deficit. People are fearful. They, and what they really need is a plan, and they need to see their unions at the table helping to negotiate that plan. There are a lot of things that just transition can do, but really, for it to be just transition, workers through their unions and employers and governments need to sit down together and negotiate the plan. And that is what will give confidence. The plan for where are the new jobs? How do we make sure those new jobs are as good or better than the jobs that we know will decline over time? Because let's be honest, the people who are doing this work, they are good jobs. They are jobs that support their family, they support their community. But with a plan that they see that their unions have had a part in helping to shape, then you can build some confidence and you can build some trust that there is a future that for them in this net zero economy. And it's going to look different sector by sector. It's going to look different in different parts of the country in terms of timelines. But I think key to that it is, unless you have unions and employers at the table working this out, then it's probably not just transition. Right. So I just will bring that back to that point.
That's very, very, very helpful. I mean, we had an excellent panel from Iron and Earth, and they talked about the studies that are done that workers are ready. They want alternatives. They want to look at this new economy, but they're saying, where is it? So the one thing I'd ask, the Prime Minister went to COP26, made a bunch of promises. Right after, the Environment Commissioner pointed out that the government makes all kinds of promises and has failed to deliver on every single one of them. But when Joe Biden was at COP26, the phrase he used all the time was that they were going to create good-paying jobs for American workers. That was the consistent line. When you hear the American Democrats talk about transition, they talk good-paying jobs for American workers. I've never heard that from our government. I've never heard them say they're going to create good-paying union jobs for Canadian workers. They say we're going to meet our global obligations. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. But there's not that sense that this is going to be a worker-centered drive, because without the workers at the heart of it, we are going to see resentment. So can the CLC present us with recommendations that we should be looking at, that we need to look at to make sure that we are reassuring workers that jobs that are going to be created are not going to be low paying? I mean, I've heard some of my Liberal colleagues saying, where are these new jobs you're talking about? Either we're saying that there's going to be better jobs and good jobs, or we're telling people a lie. How do we know that we can get this done? What is it that the CLC can give us that we can look at in terms of recommendations?
Quite a bit, my friend. And Tara, I believe, have we made our submission right now? Is it in? Because we've made a submission to the committee. We can share that. because we have.
Yeah,
we
I
have
just
stuff in
would
that.
like if there's a few key points just that you can put on the record now for us.
Go ahead, Tara.
Yeah, I think that it is key that we remember that just transition will help us meet our climate goals, but in itself, it is a jobs plan. It is a plan to create good jobs, and that is going to take investment. There's no question about that. And the best way that we can ensure that people have good jobs that support their families and communities is for those to be unionized jobs, truthfully. So the more that we can use the levers that we have to ensure that when governments invest, that those come with good job strings that say, with things like, we're going to build this infrastructure with community benefits agreements and other really concrete measures that help lift the quality of those jobs, and be clear that we want this just transition to do a lot of things, including being the key to unlock the ambition we need to meet our climate targets. But ultimately, it's all about jobs.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, we're now out of time on that round. The next round that we have is 2 5 minutes, 2 2.5 minutes, and then 2 5 minutes. And starting us off will be Mr. McLean with 5 minutes.
Well, thank you very much to all the witnesses. I'm going to start because we always have this confusion when we're drafting these reports, and my colleagues will know this. Nobody comes up with definitions. So I'm going to ask Mr. Baldwin, first of all, can you please give me what your definition of a just transition is?
I was going to defer to my colleague.
It's all you. Mr. Baldwin, time is short here. Please answer.
Yeah, so I think we've talked about it today. These are economic transitions that meet climate targets, that provide people who are transitioning for opportunity or as a result of disruption with the kind of jobs that allow them to support their family, meet their obligations, and have dignified work.
Thank you very much. We'll note that. Industries are moving their skill set requirements forward to address the jobs they think they require. And many of those jobs will be the result of changing government regulations. And government is changing regulations, and they're adjusting. But now they've got a new study here that's going to say, well, here's the just transition layered on top of what they're looking for here, which is foresight, line of sight on what those jobs are, and they're trying to meet them. Tell me how your activities through this collective bunch of organizations here is actually helping with that process as opposed to actually layering in another bureaucracy on that. Mr. Baldwin.
Sure. Future Skills Center is a partnership, but a pretty lean organization. We referred to a number of research activities, including in partnership with the Conference Board, that are starting to identify where those transitions are, where opportunities are in the future, both for workers and industry, as well as the skill requirements. And we are leaning in further to that through some partnerships that will be announced in the coming months to try to get below kind of national level projections into some sectoral and regional ones as well.
Well, thank you very much. And I noticed, because I'm accustomed to provincial governments identifying the skill sets, skill gaps in their regional economies, and filling those skill gaps with their post-secondary institutions at the provincial level. And there's colleges, there's technical institutions, there's universities, and the governments provincially work with those institutions and spend a lot of money at it, I should point out. And now I see your organizations that the federal government is funding to excess of $380 million through FTQ to do what is really an overlap of the same thing. In addition, many of these organizations around the table are funded for hundreds of millions of dollars more in order to kind of do this. And you're all working hand in hand. So this is a expensive, non-productive bureaucracy, in my opinion, and my constituents are going to say, what is the value for this work you're doing when it's really just spinning paper with no real eyesight on the outcome here? So last question for you, Mr. Baldwin. That'll be my last question. If you can just sort of say why you don't see this as a direct overlap of what's already being done at the provincial level to address the jobs of the future.
So we work very collaboratively with provincial and territorial governments across the country, as well as with local partners to identify what their needs are. So our approach is not to go into communities and tell them what they need. It's to go and listen and work with them to try to support that. We're supporting a number of initiatives that are designed to test how we can do things like support people moving from one sector to another or one occupation to another more rapidly to maintain good work or find new opportunities. We talked about an initiative in Calgary with Calgary Economic Development. That was one that was developed by those partners, CED, with the post-secondary institutions in the city to meet a need that they had identified.
Thank you, Mr. Baldwin. I'm not sure that answered the question I asked, but I appreciate it nonetheless. I'll go to Eco Canada here. Eco Canada, you got a submission, and thank you very much for a very good submission, where you talk about providing $144 million in wage subsidies to produce 14,000 wage-paying jobs. Quick math, $10,000 per job, none of which may have stuck, but that's what it is. There's also other studies that say it's $20,000 per job. But, you know, the limited jobs you're actually talking about here are, you know, there's very few jobs that you can identify where we're going forward in the equation. Tell us, Mr. Nielsen, where you think this gap of old jobs versus new jobs are, because Conference Board says there's 27 jobs in the new green economy for every 100 jobs we're going to lose in the other economy.
Sorry, I didn't quite get what the question was there. So we have given, was it about a math question or because
it is
we
a
have
math
support?
question.
Yeah, so we have, we offer up to $20,000 in wage subsidy placements to support in job creation and in training, but that the average might be lower because sometimes the jobs don't last for the full 12 months. So they're shorter in duration, therefore the average might be lower if that's what you refer to in the 10,000 versus 20,000 potentially. The sector, the environmental sector has grown at such a tremendously rapid rate that we need to do whatever we can to support job growth. And that's what we're focusing on. Employers come to us all the time saying we don't have enough people. They have started reducing the skills requirement of the people they hire because they're desperate. We're post-pandemic now when it comes to the economy. More and more organizations have more project volume than they can handle, and they need people, and that's why they come to us. That's why these wage subsidy programs are really great to help them get the people they want, help them train them, and help them bring them up and offload or take away a little bit of the development costs that they are faced with.
Okay, we're over time on that one, so I'm going to jump right over to Ms. Lapointe for her 5 minutes.
Thank you. My questions are for Mr. Burt. You made some interesting comments during your opening remarks that I would like to have you expand upon. In terms of skilled and general labor needs for the clean economy, you said for people who are still in school, we need to build green skills into educational programs. So those entering the workforce will have the appropriate building blocks to either...
Stop. The bell's light is flashing. Is there something happening? Just so the witnesses know, if we end up with votes, we get notice. And in order to continue, we need unanimous consent of the committee. And I'm not sure, I wasn't aware of anything happening, but I just need to check and see. Do we have notice? Okay, 30-minute bells?
30-minute bells.
30-minute bells. Do we want to continue? Okay, and how much time do people need to get to the house? 15 minutes, 10 minutes? I can't make people do that. They need the option of getting to the house if they want to, and I think it's 10 minutes I need to give.
We can do it in 20, we got 20 minutes here then.
Another 20 minutes, okay. So where were we? Please, Ms. Lapointe, continue. You have 4.5 minutes left.
So we are talking about building green skills into educational programs. So those entering the workforce will have the appropriate building blocks to either enter green-collar jobs or move along the green continuum over the course of their careers. So what are your thoughts on early partnerships between educators and industry to ensure the training or academic programs on offer will provide the skills needed for the sectors in the green economy?
I think it's critical. We can't be developing these programs without understanding what the employer needs are. So, we've got a number of colleagues here from the different colleges who could probably speak a little bit more to the program development they're doing, but I think it's very important that the needs of the employers are built into these programs. And I think flexibility is the key thing I would build there, because it's hard for us to say, what the skills will be 10 or 20 years from now. So making sure, that's why I focus on building blocks, because that is really enabling people to be able to adapt over the course of their career.
You also stated that the clean energy transition will look different across communities depending on local conditions, and that opportunities vary widely by region. So can you expand on or give examples of regional differences and how we can plan to have infrastructure and training in place to accommodate regional needs? So for example, my riding is in Northern Ontario, Sudbury, where resources are plentiful, but people and infrastructure are lacking. How do we plan now so that we have what we need later on?
And it's really, there's 4,000 communities in Canada, so it's hard to say what each one will do. But I think what we've been trying to do is build sort of typical communities that describe, an archetype of maybe 10 or 15 different types of communities we see in Canada and what those transitions look like. A lot of it boils down to what does your industry mix look like in your community right now. If you have a coal mine in your community, this might be a very different conversation than if you're, you've seen a new windmill farm built just outside of your community, right? So understanding what you have and where you need to go and how you can make that connection. So if you have a good understanding of what the skills are in your community right now, it can give you better guidance in terms of where you go when you're talking about economic development efforts. Otherwise, you end up with everybody kind of chasing after the same ball, if you will, in terms of the same ideal. So.
And when you say many jobs we did not define as green collar will move up the green continuum over the period, are you referring to skilled trades? And are the trades adaptable to a green economy?
It could include skilled trades. Basically, almost any role could move up the green continuum over time. So certainly the skilled trades would be part of that. The construction sector we see as a big part of particularly energy efficiency industry that we've talked about in our particular paper. But so yes, definitely skilled trades would be part of that.
Okay. And I'd like to provide Mr. Agnew the opportunity to respond also to my first question about early partnerships between educators and industry on training and academic programs.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, every one of our programs has what we call a program advisory committee, and we also use those in program development. And these are committees made up of people from the industry that we serve or that program serves. It's absolutely vital, and not only at the beginning or development of a program, but ongoing to make sure that we understand how the industry is evolving and the new skills that are required. Both from an entry level and also, as we've talked a lot about today, the kind of reskilling, upskilling of existing workers.
Okay, thank you. How much time?
There's still half a minute left.
So, and what are your thoughts also on that green continuum over this period for the skilled trades?
Yeah, I'll confess we don't do trades programs, but it's absolutely essential. And I mean, the built environment is a huge source of the challenge on the climate crisis. And the construction trades, for instance, are going to have to be kind of front line in the march towards the low carbon economy. So it's really critical.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, now we're going to go over to Larry. I'm Mr. McGuire.
Yeah, I just would suggest that we hear the block and the NDP and then let our witnesses go. I'm also wanting to make sure, though, that we do get the full hour if this happens again where we're having a vote, and we get the full hours with the minister on Wednesdays, not on Wednesday coming up, because it's estimates.
Yeah, for Wednesday we have the minister until 5 o'clock or 2 rounds. So we'll see what we can get in there. There are, I think, a couple of votes on Wednesday, so we'll get started as quickly as we can.
Yeah, as long as we get the full time that we
we'll squeeze every minute out of it that we can. So we'll go now to Madame Posé for 2.5 minutes. So for the witnesses, the next two go quite quickly.
Alors, oui, et les réponses rapides.
Yes, so quick answers, please. So I'm going to follow up with Mrs. Lapointe's question. I'm going to ask Mrs. Williams, in your presentation, you talked about inequality between regions, and in the document that you sent, it speaks to inequality. Why is there this inequality, and how can we remedy this?
It's a it's a point that I think we've been focusing on increasingly in recent months, and as my colleague Noel said, it's something that we're really attuned to addressing. I think it points to the diversity of regions and sectors across Canada. So there's been, to our understanding, there's been more of the 20,000-foot view. And really, if we need to land the plane, we need to understand what does it look like for sectors and regions specifically. And we're working with, hundreds of employers across Canada, if not thousands, and they're saying it's different in each place.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, Mr. Rousseau from CLC. You, in your budget, you were asking to invest billions of dollars to help with training and to develop sustainable energy. And you were talking about housing, etc. But in Quebec, we have what we call the Commission des partenaires sur le marché du travail. They have advisory committees. It's an agreement with the federal government. It's been in place since 1997. And so it's relevant in Quebec to have an integrated model for public service and for training concentrated on the needs of clients. So this can be very useful for the regions. I imagine you would agree if these billions of dollars, if there was a type of mechanism so that the money would be given to Quebec and the provinces and managed by Quebec and the individual provinces. I'm not going to venture into federal-provincial negotiations, but we have a model in Quebec that we at the Canadian Labour Congress appreciate. Our colleagues from the FTQ oftentimes said we have to have strategies, high-level strategies, where the workers' sector, the private sector of industry, as well as the government, have to work together. We cannot talk about a fair transition without having this. I'm sorry, I have to interrupt you. I have a red square before me. Okay.
And we'll now go to Mr. Angus for his final 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. I want to follow up with something that you said earlier that I've been very perturbed by since I heard it. When we talk with Alberta workers and they talk about the transition being underway already, to me that's a sign that there's a sense of urgency, because obviously this is a Canadian issue, but in Alberta is certainly going to be where much of this is settled. We've heard from people who talk, organizations, about the huge opportunities in green tech, but they all come with a big if. If there's clear investment and sustained investment, because this economy is not just going to create itself out of thin air. And yet you say the research of where these jobs are hasn't been done. That, to me, is a really frightening red flag. Could you explain?
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. So we're about to embark on a partnership with the Smart Prosperity Institute, and what we will be doing is regional and sector analyses to be very specifically targeted to where job opportunities are and where there are risks. Without intervention, I think we risk potentially people not being brought along, right, and not having being able to make those transitions. So we've tested this on the ground with different organizations, different training interventions to say, how do you take a person from point A to point B? Doing the numbers about not just do they finish a course, but do they get a job at the end? What's their salary? What does that look like?
Well, this concerns me. I've lived through unjust transitions in Northern Ontario, and I've seen the disaster that it is. The Environment Commissioner said the coal transition wasn't properly thought out, and that was something very in a limited scale. But we're talking about targets that we need to hit in 2030. That's roughly just over 7 years away, and suddenly we're going to transition in an entire economy without a plan. What do we need to do to put in place to reassure workers, but also to make sure that we're going to meet our international obligations to transition to cleaner technologies?
I think, there's been a lot of questions from the committee about employers being involved. I think we have to make sure that employers are involved, labor, workers. We can't go and make a plan without any one of these groups. So certainly I think the committee consulting with these groups is the right step, but it needs to be tangible and needs to know that there's going to be support and investments. At the end of the day, they will pay dividends.
If you have any recommendations, can you send them to our committee?
We will.
Thank you very much.
And regrettably, folks, we're at the end of this round. Now, by the time we get to the vote, have the vote, and to get back, we're going to be out of time. And so we're going to have to suspend or cancel or not adjourn the meeting. That's the word here, adjourn the meeting. But I did want to thank all of the witnesses for your time. I, again, apologize for the interruptions that we've had, but we've had some very, very useful testimony. I'd like to also invite you, if you have additional information, as has been discussed, reports that you think would be relevant, or you can send, feel free to send in up to an additional 10-page brief if there are conversations that you feel you had more to add to, and that can be directed through the clerk. And sooner than later is better. So we need to translate them and distribute them in time to get the report at least in the draft form in June. So with that, thank you so much, everyone. And for the committee members, we'll see you on Wednesday. And for now, meeting adjourned.
Thank you.